fall. Well, what I want to start out with is a story, firstly, on perspective. And then I want to tell you a few stories about my business life and my surfing life, and perhaps all of you guys might be able to draw some analogies with the particular situation that you're all facing in your business careers and your lives right now. John's told me a little bit about the company and the merger and how all that is going to eventuate. And of course I'm going to talk to you about change as it has related to my life as well. Perspective. Like, you walk over here, you look at something, and you walk over here, look at something, and you can get two different viewpoints. So I'm originally from Durban, South Africa. My home place is about 10,000 miles away from here. I now live in Santa Barbara. I've lived here for 17 years. I love this place. My wife and I live in Montecito. We've been really welcomed with open arms by this community. And I see I'm the only African American in the place today. So we just love this place. But I still like to get back to, sorry, I thought I'd turn this off. We still like to get back to our homeland. And we try to get back to South Africa 2 times a year. As you all know, South Africa's gone through some fundamental changes over the last number of years. When I grew up, we lived in the apartheid regime. So it was a system of institutionalized segregation. South Africa became democratic in 1994, and there's been this amazing transition of a country that has been suppressed and subjugated to a wonderful modern society, and all through the power of the leader, Nelson Mandela. So anyway, I went back to South Africa last year with my wife, and I was a professional surfer. I competed on the Pro Tour for 16 years. My whole life was built around surfing and creating businesses around surfing. And I'm still very passionate about surfing. I still love to get out there. Any surfers in the audience here? A couple of those guys are surfers. So as a surfer, you maintain that passion and enthusiasm and that connection between yourself and nature. And I'm still very enthusiastic. So the day I arrived back in my hometown, I haven't been back for 2 years, I get a pal of mine, thank you. Interesting. Phones me up and says, Shaun, I'm going to take you surfing tomorrow, and it's to a break that you've never surfed before. So when you hear that in South Africa, in the area that I grew up in, you immediately get worried. Now why? Where I grew up, the most feared predator was a Zambezi shark. It wasn't like a lion. You think of Africa, you think of lions and leopards and sheep. It's a Zambezi shark. Now the Zambezi shark accounts for about 95% of the shark attacks in South Africa. Deadly predator. My father was nearly killed by a Zambezi shark when he was a young bloke, so I'm very familiar with what a Zambezi shark can do. We only used to surf inside shark nets. So I surfed up and down that whole coast around where I lived, and it was always inside shark nets. Now this mate of mine phones me up and says, I'm going to take you to a place you've never surfed before. I knew firstly, there ain't going to be any shark nets. And at that time of year, the water's warm, a lot of Zambezis around. They have what they call the sardine run in South Africa. It's the shoal of, huge shoal of fish. No one knows where they come from, no one knows where they go, but it travels up the coast. You have all the apex predators following the fish that follow the sardines, and what happens, there's so many sharks follow the sardines, they have to lift up the nets because the nets just, the shark nets get filled with these sharks. So I knew that sardine run season, warm water, a bit of a problem with the Zambezis. So he said, but we got to go. He picks me up at 6:30 in the morning and takes me down to this break. I've never surfed before. And we walk along the beach, just 2 of us. And from a surfer's perspective, the surf was unbelievable. It was about 8 to 10 feet and flawless. These incredible tube rides. Now the ultimate moment in surfing is to ride inside this tube of water. It's just this existential part of surfing. You feel like time's expanded, the time's actually slowed down, and that's exactly what it looks like. You're inside this spinning tube of water, and it feels like the past is just behind you, the present's beneath your feet, and the future is just ahead of you, spinning ahead of you. You're always sort of searching for the light. It's an amazing moment. It's unlike any other experience in the world. You actually feel happy, frightened, all at the same time. It's this amalgam of emotions. And as we're walking down, I can see these incredible tube rides just sort of spitting down towards us. And what happens is the tube sort of starts to close, and builds up all this compressed water and it shoots it out. You might have seen photos of the Banzai pipeline, and it shoots out this incredible burst of compressed air. And as we were walking down the beach, these tubes were just, surfers call it spitting, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I knew the surf was going to be incredibly challenging. Here in winter time, we get some strong surf on the coast here. Surf breaks like Rincon and up at Halam and even out on the Channel Islands. But it's nothing like these Indian Ocean waves that are generated by storms in Antarctica. You guys know maps. The weather, the low pressure systems generate these incredible swells, and they just come onto this coastline with incredible force and ferocity. So we're walking up the beach together, and what happens is the water is very warm at that time of year, but the air is cold, so the air is about 55. So this mist rises off the water, and we're like walking through the mist. It's sort of surreal, and seeing these incredible waves walk down. And as I'm getting closer and closer, I'm getting a little bit more frightened. Now, during my career, I never really got that frightened. I mean, I rode some huge waves all over the world, but I hadn't been surfing that much. I was a bit unfit, Zambesis. I'm a bit concerned, and we walk up to the tip of the point, and we jump in the water and we paddle out. It's quite an ordeal to get out through the wave. These waves are coming in, we have to sort of bust our way out through. There's no clear channel. And we get out the back just as the sun is rising up over the ocean. We face the east coast, so the sun rises up through the ocean. It's like this sort of molten ball that's boiling up through the ocean. It's just a wonderful experience. You really feel like you're getting connected to nature. You're just sitting out there with your friend and yourself, and some dolphins were going by. It's just awesome. So I swing around and I take off on my first wave. And the takeoff, in surfing they call it, as you catch the wave, they call it the takeoff, was very steep because the waves come out of deep water, they hit the shallow sandbar, and they stand up really straight. So it's a very challenging, tricky takeoff. So very steep, very intimidating. I go, whoa, this is a radical wave. That's what the surfers call it, a radical wave. So I caught a few waves and started to build up my confidence. And my friend and I then started to exchange these waves, and we started to get these incredible tube rides. And that was my specialty when I used to be a pro a long time ago. But tube riding was sort of my specialty, and I just felt like I was 20 years old again. It was awesome. I'm 57, so it was a long time ago. But that's the thing about surfing, it just gives you this incredible charge and this youthful enthusiasm. So we just caught these incredible waves, and it was a wonderful experience. Just my friend, myself, and nature. It was just awesome. So I paddled over to him after a couple of hours, and I said, "Hey John, what do you call this break?" Well, surfers often have really descriptive names for their breaks. There's a break up in Northern California, you've heard about it, called Mavericks. That's killed actually a number of people, killed a good mate of mine. Mavericks because like any Maverick surfer. You've heard of the Banzai pipeline in Hawaii. Banzai because that's what the kamikaze guys used to say when they were going in, and pipeline because it's like a pipe. So he said, we call the wave one eye. So I said, well, why do you call it one eye? He said, because when the wave breaks, it looks like an eye. And I thought, wow, that's very, very cool. So I caught my last wave in. I was walking along the beach. My friend was still back out there. And there's an old fisherman guy on the beach. Now I'm dripping wet, wetsuit, board under my arm, like shivering a bit. He said, you haven't been out there surfing, have you? I went, well, duh. He said, you know what we call that wave? I said, yeah, you call it one eye. He said, well, do you know why we call it one eye? I said, yeah, you call it one eye because when it breaks, it looks like a human eye. He said, no. He said, we call it one eye because there's a big Zambezi out there in the lineup. And when it rolls over on its side to bite, all you can see is one eye. So that is just a little funny story on perspective. To the fisherman, it's the Zambezi. To me, it's paradise. So there are so many different ways of looking at so many different things in life. So today, starting off with perspective, I wanted to share 2 words from the surf. And perhaps these surf words might have application to what you guys are all facing in your lives and careers right now. Commit and connect. Super simple words. Inward, outward. A number of years ago, based on these 2 words and what surfing had taught me, I made up a little card that I gave to a group of kids that were coming down to the Rincon, the famous break just south of here, for a contest my friend was having to stimulate interest in the environment. Rincon was having some severe environmental problems. All the homeowners that live on the coast were connected up to septic tank systems, not sewer lines. When it rained, the septics would overflow and the crap would flow into the water. So this guy, Glenn Henning, who started this amazing institution called Surfrider Foundation, decided to do something about it. And one of the things he wanted to do was bring a group of kids down to the beach and get them more environmentally aware. And he said to me, Shaun, I want you to give these guys a gift. So I want you to give them a present. He said, and you've got $100 budget. I'm going like, $100 bucks, what am I going to do for $100? At the time, my wife and I had an apparel company called Solitude. We thought, well, maybe we'll give them some t-shirts, or I'll phone up one of the surf companies, Quicksilver, and get some t-shirts. And I thought, no, I'm going to try to be creative within the $100 budget. So I went home that night, and this was a very cool exercise. And this little exercise really, it did change my life. And it's something that's a very cool thing to do. In 20 minutes, stream of consciousness, I wrote down the 12 most important lessons that surfing had taught me about life. Simple, very simple, I wrote that. And I printed them up on a little card, 100 cards, $1 each, laminated them with plastic, and I gave those out to the kids the next day. And these are just simple, basic metaphors for life. I'll never turn my back on the ocean. I'll always paddle back out. I'll take the drop with commitment. Really, really simple concepts. And I gave the card to the kids. And the kids' moms and dads wanted them, and the kids' pals wanted them. And ultimately, we just kept producing these cards because people just wanted them. It was nice, simple lessons about life that surf had taught me. You know that famous Chilean writer, Nobel Peace Prize winner, Pablo Neruda, poet. I mean, this guy's a Renaissance man. One of his poems, I need the sea because it teaches me. I live in the University of the Waves. I mean, unbelievable. A Santa Barbara author translated his work, a woman called Mary Huebner put some beautiful words and art around these words and gave me this book. And I remember reading this. I need the sea because it teaches me. I live in the University of the Waves. Beautiful, beautiful. And that's kind of what that whole concept was. And ultimately, it turned into a groundswell. We started putting the little cards into pockets of all the board shorts we used to make at the time. We handed out hundreds of thousands of these cards. And then I started talking to different companies about these simple lessons and about how it applies to these words that we all faced with. Maybe, can't, think about it, someday. The whole concept of indecision, fear, what's going to happen, man? It's like, I went back to that card, like, I've been through, like everyone, been through tough times in life, and that whole concept of like, man, how are you going to change it? Commitment. I will. It's like, that's what the surf taught me. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about those two words. I will. I spoke to you about the whole concept of committing and connecting. And then the two words, I will. Ultimately, I wrote a book. I collaborated with a pal of mine, and we wrote this book, Surfer's Code, that became very popular with surfers, business community. It's been through 17 printings, and just the basic lessons that surf taught me about life. So there's 12 lessons in the book. I know Joan was kind enough to get all you guys a book, and maybe, afterwards outside, you can give it to your kids or friends. But I'd encourage you, just read it. It takes 2 hours. It's super simple. And maybe, from a concept of perspective, there's something in it for you. Maybe not. But it's only 2 hours, and my heart's in that book. Take the drop with commitment. I'll talk to you about a couple of the lessons that surfing taught me about life. The whole concept of our world. This is a Banzai pipeline. I spoke to you earlier. Banzai suicide pipeline. The most dangerous wave in the world. All surfers have heard of this wave. When I grew up as a young boy in Durban, South Africa, I had a picture of the Banzai pipeline, this famous surfer called John Peck, right above my bed. And every night I'd look at that picture. My dad bought it for me, and I'm going, when I put it up there, I don't know if I should have this above my bed. I would look at it with a mixture of attraction to want to go there one day and surf it, and also like, wow, that wave looks so scary. And ultimately I went there. I went there when I was, my dad, I'm a Jew, for my bar mitzvah present. My dad took me to Hawaii. How about that? What a cool, my dad was just like, he operated on a different level. And I didn't surf the Banzai Pipeline that year, I looked at it. And then when I went back 14, this time I wasn't with my dad, I remember paddling out there. And as a surfer, you paddle out and you look at the wave, and the wave just breaks with this incredible ferocity, speed, and power. It comes out of very deep water, these swells that have been generated by storms up in the North Pacific off the Siberian Peninsula, and they come straight down towards the Hawaiian Islands. Now the Hawaiian Islands, there's no they're all lava, coral islands, so it's like thousands and thousands of feet deep, and boom, then you've got the island. So these waves are coming straight out of the deep Pacific and just exploding. So they come into the beach so fast. Waves here in Santa Barbara have traveled a long way, and by the time they're moving into the coastline, you can sit there on the beach and watch them. The speed they move in is very sort of slow. Even in South Africa, the storms are a lot closer to the coast, so they're coming faster. But Hawaii, the speed, I remember paddling out and watching these waves come over, it was beyond intimidating. Because I knew that one slip there, you could die. I think 18 people have been killed at Pipeline, more than anywhere else in the world. More injuries happen there. It is so dangerous because you're surfing over a very shallow coral reef. And not only is it shallow and sharp, but there's like caves in there. Guys, there have been stories of guys getting trapped in the caves. It's just so scary. But I knew that if I one day wanted to be considered a good surfer, hey man, I'd have to go there. And I'd have to test myself against the pipe. Because that was always, that's the benchmark.
We'll get to that part.
So that was the benchmark for surfer. And even today, all the greatest surfers of the world, from Kelly Slater on down, Kelly Slater, he's won the world title 11 times. You cut it at pipe, you can cut it anywhere. So even back then in my era in the 70s, I knew I had to cut it at pipeline. So I paddled out there that first time, totally intimidated. Managed to get a couple of waves, feeling very proud of myself. Went back the following winter. Now I'm bigger, stronger, more confident, a little bit maybe a bit more arrogant, thinking, I've got this place under control. Paddled out there. When I say I got drilled, I couldn't get to the bottom without surfing. You call it purling. You like your board just digs in, right, and they call it purling up to your neck. It's when your board digs in and you go right up to your neck and bash, you get smashed into the coral. I just had a day of like destruction. And I was the one that was being destroyed on that coral reef. Smashed, bashed, crashed. I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this well. Went back the following year, and I was 19 years old. Maybe a couple of winters later. Just finished my first year of economics at university, and I had this board that this friend of mine had made me. Now, the traditional Hawaiian gun, they call it, for big riding big waves, red. They call it, it's like, and I thought, well, I'm going to have one of these traditional Hawaiian guns. So even if I'm not the part, I'll look the part, I'll have my red board. So the guy that made it for me in South Africa, it was quite the sort of surfboard construction in South Africa was a little bit primitive. The board turned out pink. So it's like, surfing pretty macho, testosterone, and now my board's pink. And it was too late to change it, so I'm going to Hawaii now with a pink board. And not only that, but I bought pictures of a Hawaiian board to him to say, you've got to copy this board, because Hawaiian boards are much longer, they're much more sleek than South African boards, because the bigger the wave, the bigger the board. And the board had this particular bow in it, surfers call it a rocker, because the waves at Pipeline are so hollow, you need a board that's curved as well. So you need a board that is not going to curl up to your neck, it's not going to dig in, so it needs to have curve in it. So when I went to look at the board, not only is it pink, but the board has got this incredible bend in it. It looks like a pink banana. So I said, what happened? His name was Spider, my shaper. He said, well, I couldn't get the bend in that you wanted, so I got a big pile of bricks, and I put them on the front of the board to bend it even more. He said, but it bends it too much. So I'm going, well, I've got to take this board with me. So take the board over to Hawaii, and I'm thinking, well, I've got to use it, because in those days it wasn't like today. You get boards overnight, and you can have hundreds of boards. I mean, I had my 2 boards to take to Hawaii, my small wave board, my big wave board. So I walked down the beach with my pink board, and all the guys, can you imagine? This guy. Firstly, they didn't know nothing about me. Then, who's this kid, walking down the beach with a pink board. Everyone like had long hair, you know, 70s, and I'm like sort of pretty straight up and down family, you know, short hair. And who's this guy? So I paddled out my first wave for my first session in Hawaii. And I paddled out at a place called Sunset Beach, which is sort of the true test for performance big wave surfing. It's this amazing contest venue in Hawaii. And I remember I took off on my first wave, and as I did my bottom turn, if you drop to the bottom of the wave, they call it doing a bottom turn. This guy had fallen out of the space, never seen him. As I did my bottom turn, the board like spun out, and I landed right against the guy's board, and I got it right across the legs. He just mashed my legs. I actually thought I'd broken my legs, and I'm going, I mean, not only did the board feel terrible on the way, but I've got this like radical injury. They had to rush me to the hospital. They patched me up. So about a week goes by after I recuperate. The surf comes up, and now pipeline is breaking. And I says, "Shaun, let's go and surf pipe. Let's go and surf." And I'm going, I'm so nervous. I've been injured at Sunset. I've got this like strange board. Now I'm going to have to go and try and surf pipe. So I thought, okay, take my pink board. And I walked down the beach at Pipeline. I'll never forget this. At Pipeline, you have all like the top guys of the area. They all have these homes on the beach. And I'm walking down the beach with my pink board. The surf's 10 to 12 feet. And they're all shouting, "Hey, where are you going with that pink banana?" I'm sort of dying of embarrassment trying to creep down there. But now I jump in the water, and I'm like determined to try to show the guys, you know, like I've got what it takes. And I paddle out there. But I'm nervous too, because I've got punished there the year before. And the first wave comes, and I think, I've got to change how I'm thinking about the wave. Let me just take that drop with absolute commitment. Not worry about the ultimate objective, which is making the wave and getting a great ride, but just take that drop with absolute commitment. This is no word of a lie. That first wave came through. I swung around, paddled into that wave. Of course, I was a bit more determined because of all the bit of the heckling on the beach. And I took that wave, and I remember taking that drop, and it was like it changed my life. That one wave. Not only did I take the drop with commitment, but strangely enough, the board with all the curve in it fitted perfectly into the wave. It was perfect. And ultimately, this board went on to be a revolutionary board and changed the way the pipeline could be ridden. But if I hadn't taken off with an absolute commitment, I would have never had the opportunity to try the board. Now, for all you guys in business, I think this is for me it was like an epiphany. Just don't focus on where you're going. Focus on what you're doing. Right there. That like, part of being in that existential, in that absolute moment of focusing on taking the drop with commitment as opposed to, yeah, that's where I'm going to go, right? I know, because I'm not talking because I read it in a Tom Peters book. I know, because it worked for me. And ultimately, the following year I won the Pipeline Masters, the biggest contest in the world. I was 20 at the time. I was the young, for about 10 years, I was the youngest guy to win that event. And just that whole concept of taking the drop with absolute commitment, focusing on just the drop and not ultimately making the wave, it did change my life. Never found a riptide. You guys, a lot of changes with all of you. My father taught me this lesson when I was 6 years old, when I started swimming for the first time at this break called the Bay of Plenty. This is the break where I first learned how to swim and where I caught my first wave. For the surfers and the audience, imagine growing up with that wave in front of your house. I lived 20 yards away from that wave. It was like unbelievable. You can see, the surfers will see that that's a riptide. You all know what happens. You get caught in a riptide, can't fight that thing. It's going to take you out to sea. My dad said, "Hey, Shaun, you're going to get caught in a riptide. But all you do is let it take you out and then swim back around, or else swim diagonally. But don't try to swim in." And every year there was a big jetty that went out here. You can see the tip of it there. Every year all these holiday makers would come down from like our version of the Midwest. They'd jump in the water, they'd swim around, they'd get sucked down the riptide. try to paddle against it, they either end up jumping up onto the mussel-encrusted pier and just get shredded, or we'd have to rescue them, or tragically, some of the guys would drown. And my dad said, don't fight the riptide. And for me, this was a great lesson for me specifically in my surfing career. 1977, I won the world title, so I thought I was pretty hot stuff. These were the boards that I was riding at the time. That's me, and that's a guy called Mark Richards. He was my great rival at the time. We were locked in this like fierce rivalry. Who could wear the smallest, tightest shorts? But those are my boards. They were called single fin round pintails. They had one fin. Right at the back here, underneath, there's one fin. You can see the board is like pintail. 1977, just after I'd won the world title, like the main wave for performance surfing was a wave called Off the Wall. In a way, it broke like 20 yards off the beach, and all the cameras would be there. It was like a full-on media frenzy. And not only was there like who was the best surfer in the world competitively, but who was the best surfer, free surfer. So I just won the title, and Mark and I were like, who's the best free surfer? You know, like the talk on the beach. Mark walks down the beach right at the end of the winter with this board called a twin fin. I'm riding a single fin traditional. This is like so revolutionary. I'm walks down the beach. I see, gee, what's Mark? It looks like a knee board, which is these little boards that guys use on their knees. And this design was originally in the 70s developed just for guys to ride on the knee. Short, wide, two fins. I mean, what the hell is Mark doing? He walks down the beach. And I can imagine how those guys thought when I walked down with a pink boarded pipeline, you know, like, but I wasn't going to say anything. He walks down the beach, takes off on the first wave, does a bottom turn, accelerates faster than I've ever seen anyone except it. And I could see it right there, future. I could see the future right there. You know, there's that amazing quote about Bruce Springsteen. I don't know if you guys, any of you guys into rock and roll music, that guy John Landau wrote in Rolling Stone magazine. He ultimately became his manager. I've seen the future of rock and roll. His name is Bruce Springsteen. And I'm looking at the future of surfing. I can see it there. I'm thinking, I've got to get one of those boards. But I didn't. Because in my arrogance and hubris, I thought, I'm the champ. I'm not going to get one of those boards. I'm going to do it my way. For 2 years, Mark Richards kicked my backside all over the world. Every event I came up against Mark just smacked me like a child. And it wasn't until, ultimately, I got into twin fin that I was able to be competitive again. That I realized, man, you can't fight the riptide. And I think it's for all of us in life. You know, there are those inexorable trends. There's inexorable changes. You can fight them as much as you want. You can bust your head. Or you can understand them, accept them, and take advantage of them. Always paddle back out. Very simple concept. This is Waimea Bay. While pipeline might be the most dangerous wave in the world, in the 70s, 80s, through the 90s, this was the biggest. And still, even today with these waves like Mavericks, this still, I think, is still one of the, maybe the biggest paddle-in wave in the world. Obviously, you've seen guys now on jet skis ride these like mega waves, 50, 60 feet. But the maximum size wave you can paddle to is about 25 feet, maybe approaching 30, which is Waimea Bay. Now, also, as a young bloke, I had a lot of fear associated with ultimately having to go out and surf this way because pipeline was a danger. This was sort of like, ooh, that wave was so big, it's like a mountain. And it's like the Mount Everest of surfing and the K2 and Mont Blanc all like merged together. Few people have died there. The very first time it was surfed, a guy died there. So there's sort of this mystique around it. Right above the break, there's an ancient Hawaiian burial ground. I mean, imagine like a burial ground right above the break. They call it a heiau. So it always had this aura of mysticism about it. So the first time I surfed Waimea was during a surf contest. I'd managed to make it through preliminaries. I was 19 years old. I managed to make it through preliminaries at Sunset Beach, the break that I told you about where I got my legs mashed. I got through to the finals there, and the surf got so big, they moved it to Waimea Bay. What happens is surfing breaks have a size range. Like in Hawaii, because surf gets so big there that a break will break from 0 to 6 feet, and then another break will be from 6 to 15, and then 15 plus. When everything is unrideable, there's only one break, and you go to Waimea Bay and you can surf waves there in 20, 25 feet. Well, our contest is called on. Now I'm going, whoa, no way, I have to paddle out in the final. I don't even have a board big enough. Bigger the wave, the bigger the board. My longest boards is 7'11" for riding sunset. Waimea, you need a minimum of 9 foot. Now it's only only a foot, but that's a huge amount of difference from a surfer's perspective. So I managed to borrow a board from a mate of mine on the beach, and I paddle out in the lineup now. It's like these legendary legends. And paddle out, and I think, I've got to get the first wave. I have to stamp my authority on this final. So this like massive wave comes up, like maybe one of the biggest waves I've ever seen, and I swing around, I've paddled around all the guys, I've sort of, in competition, everyone sort of sits in a huddle and they're all trying to jockey for position. I jockeyed for position and wanted to get the first wave of the final. I remember paddling into this wave, I'm looking over my shoulder and it's just like beyond huge. Paddle, 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 and what happens, when it's surfing, the waves look like they actually sort of break in slow motion because it's so far from the top to like the surface of the water. So I'm paddling for this wave, I get the wave and all this wind is rushing up the face, and I stand up on my board, and I'll never remember what I thought at the time. This is a piece of cake. There's a famous Hawaiian surfer called Jerry Lopez, this legendary freerider, and he once spoke about pipeline. He said it's a cakewalk, and I always thought, how can you say it's a cakewalk? So this must have been in my mind. As I'm taking my mind, this is a piece of cake, I'd write this thing. So then the wave hit the shallow part of the coral reef, and it stood absolutely vertically. So the part that I thought was a piece of cake was just sort of the precursor. It was like a little takeoff, like a ski jumper. So, whoom! I'm over the ski jump, and next thing I'm just sort of fluttering down through space. And on my tippy toes, trying to keep the board underneath me because I want to land and make the wave. So the board lands, I land, my legs buckle, and then I skip across the surface of the wave like a stone, which is the worst thing for anyone that's been a surfer. It's like the worst thing that can happen because you're completely exposed. You always try to get under there to get some protection between you and this huge behemoth that's going to land on you. And I skipped and skipped and skipped, and as I'm skipping, I'm going, this is going to be so bad. You know, it's like impending doom. And you just get the sensation of the water sort of drawing up the face, and as you're skipping, the wave detonated on me like an explosion, right on the back, hit me right here, just on my spine. And it hit me so deep, it took me down, Waimea breaks about 30 feet of water, it took me straight down to the coral and just jammed me there. And then the sensation of turbulence, just being smashed around. But that ferocity and that absolute force, it's probably been like run over by a truck, just bang! You know, you just sort of, in surfing they call it like ragdoll, you just like ragdolled around. Smashed me down the bottom. I'm completely out of gas, and I know I've got to get to the surface before that next wave comes, because if I get mowed down, waves about 17 to 21 seconds apart, I get mowed down, I'm under 2, chances of dying are really good. So I remember I just press off the bottom, and I'm just gunning for the surface. And as I'm about to get up there, the next wave mows me down. So now I'm under 2, and I thought, a good chance of it being tickets. So this time I managed to get to the surface, and as I get to the surface again, I get another gulp of air, and the wave hits me, and I know I'm okay. Anyway, the wave pushes me all the way in, and now I can barely move my legs. I'm really in a bad way. I think I might have broken my spine, and I swim all the way in. Waimea breaks far, about 350 yards out. I swim in, and my board's floating in the rip current. In those days, there was no lifeguards. It was just kind of the 6 guys in the water, and that was it. So I get to my board, and I decide what to do. Now, I'm 50 yards away from the beach, 300 yards back out to the final. I've just had my ass kicked beyond belief. And I came to that like fundamental moment that like every single one of us is going to come to us in some other occasion or another place in your lives. But like, what do? Paddle back out, or you paddle in? I'm 19, severely mashed, and I remember thinking, what do I do? You know that, it's almost like a split second, like, well, what do you do? Because I was scared, man. Scared for my life. Not so much for career, but scared for my life. And I looked at the beach, I looked back out. And I swung around and I paddled back out. And that one little decision changed me forever. Paddled back out, I got 2 more waves. 6 guys in the final. You know who came 6th. But that was my greatest victory, I think. I won 19 major professional events around the world. I was competed on the tour for 16 years. I was in the top 6 for 9 straight years. I was the oldest guy to win, the youngest guy to win. That, to me, paddle back out with 2 more waves. I was a man. And I took that confidence, that courage, because we've all got that courage. You just don't know you've got it until you are put to that test. I paddled back out, and that little decision helped me so much in my business life. My wife and I started a company, Solitude, a number of years ago. Santa Barbara, some of the people here might have even worn our stuff. We made beautiful stuff. We sold in the most famous stores in the nation, Saks, Barney's, Nordstrom's, Bloomingdale's, you name it, we sold our product there. We had a trajectory like this, a growth curve like this. I get a call on 9/11 from my sales rep outside the Holland Tunnel. He's got an appointment with Saks, our biggest dealer, Saks Fifth Avenue. Shaun, you won't believe what's happening. Planes are flying into the trade center. You can imagine what happened to our business, because we were a small business, under 20 million. Orders got cancelled. We stuck with inventory, all this stuff we produced for orders cancelled. We struggled and struggled. My wife eventually said to me, Shaun, we've got to close this business down. We have everything invested, our home's on the line, we're going to lose everything. We came over here from South Africa 17 years ago. Essentially, we had to start our lives again after my pro career was over. I said, how can we close it down? She said, we've got to close it down because we're going to lose everything. So over a period of a week, all of our friends came in, they helped us, we unloaded all the inventory, got rid of all of our employees. We had an amazing group had an amazing team. Friday afternoon, there's 2 things left. This is God's truth. 2 things left in the office. Company server, my workstation. The guys come to move it away. I said, I want to fight another day. Saturday morning, I get a call from my best mate who's been teaching baseball at Montecito. He said, Shaun, you won't believe what happened to me. I was wearing a Solitude shirt, and a guy came up to me and said, hey, that's a cool shirt. Now, if you're a guy, how many times in your life have you ever gone up to another guy and said, that's a cool shirt? Because you know what the guy's going to think, I'm not worried about that. And he said, yeah, it's a Solitude shirt. It's Shaun and Carla's company. Closing down. He said, my father and I are investors. We love that brand. Maybe we can meet with Thompsons, and maybe we can invest in their business and help them through this tough time. We met on the Sunday. Handshake deal on the Sunday. We opened for business on Monday morning. We opened for business, moved everything back in, rehired the crew. 4 years later, I'm sitting on the 37th floor, Park Avenue in New York City. Across from me is the vice president of the 4th biggest apparel retailer in the United States. I've shown her the line. Sitting next to her is a CEO of a $1.2 billion publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange, who said, Shaun, I want to buy your company, but I'll only buy it if the retailer, JCPenney's, if they give you an order. I'd shown the line to the VP, and she knew of the position. So I said, listen, you've told me you like the product, he wants to buy us, he's not going to buy us unless he gives you an order. What's it going to be? She said, I'll open with 30 million. I put my hand across the table and shook her hand. Now, I'm not telling you that because I made a successful business deal. That's not the point of it. I'm telling you because at 19 years old, when I sat on my board and the shore was 50 yards away and those behemoths were 300 yards out, I got on my board and I paddled back out. And that's what the ocean has taught me about life, is don't give up. Commit, don't fight the riptide. Simple lessons, how simple is that? So, I know I'm running out of time.
No, we could probably do another hour.
If you want me to,
No, actually, I've got,
because I mean, with pleasure I can.
go for it.
Okay. So I wanted to talk to you about one last thing, and that is, I think, one of the most important things in all our lives. I don't know how many of you are have children. Quite a few of you guys have got children. But even if you haven't got children, this whole concept of passing on the stoke, you can see that I love surfing. Our surfers call it being stoked. I'm a stoke guy. But the second best thing, or maybe it's the best thing about surfing, is like passing on that enthusiasm to someone else. I've been involved with Surf Rider Foundation since 1984. I was the first pro surfer to be a member. I'm involved with Boys and Girls Clubs. It's great to just sort of give back. It's just a wonderful feeling to pass on that stuff, the great stuff that you've learned in your lives, to give it back in some way and not ask anything for it. It's like that little card I did. That little card changed my life, and because this wonderful guy Glenn Henning who started surf asked me, and he's given back so much. It was like, okay, well, you stimulated me to do something, and it really changed my life. But this concept of passing on the stoke and connecting with other people is it's like so important. So a lot of you surf guys know about Hammond's Reef. Beautiful wave right near where I live in Montecito. It's one of my most favorite places in the world. And at Hammond's, there's a beautiful meadow that joins the break. Beautiful meadow. And these like mega million-dollar homes all around it, but Surf Rider was one of the groups that fought to keep this meadow open to the public. So you have this incredible ambiance there, this sort of sense of spirituality. And it was home to the Shumash people. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, there was a settlement there. And still, some of the Shumash crew get down there, they do their sacred ceremonies. And on the meadow, there's this beautiful memorial that the Shumash Foundation or the Shumash guy has put up. And you can go there anytime. You go down to Hammond's, you'll see it on the meadow there, and it's got these wonderful dolphin figurines on it. And people leave shells there, and they leave feathers there and stones, just in remembrance of a time gone by and in remembrance of the Shumash people. And there's an inscription on this memorial that I think is probably one of the most profound pieces of writing I've ever read. And the inscription is this: "The sacredness of the land lies in the mind of its people. This land is dedicated to the spirit and memory of the ancestors and their children." So the inscription talks about the past, the present, and the future, and this connectedness. The sacredness of the land lies in the mind of its people. This land is dedicated to the spirit and memory of the ancestors and their children. So my son Matthew was 9 at the time, and we'd gone down on this particular day to check out the surf, and he loved Hammond, he loved the memorial. He said, "Dad, let's go up to the memorial and give down some offerings." So we ran up to the memorial, we put a couple of stones and feathers there, and he said, "Dad, help me do this." And he ran down the beach. It was just 2 of us on the beach on this particular day. It was kind of a stormy day. We'd been checking out the surf. And he started to make a circle of stones on the sand, a large circle of stones with cobblestones. And I just went along and helped him. Inside that circle, he made another circle. And inside that circle, he made a third circle. You should count the cobblestones at Hammond. The innermost circle was about this size. And then he made a pathway through the circle, and he got 2 large rocks and put them in the innermost circle. So I said, "Matthew, what's this?" He said, "Dad, this is a sacred story circle." How about that? If you look at literature, you will not find a reference to a sacred story circle. It doesn't exist. It came from my 9-year-old's brain, just evoked by the ocean and the memorial and the meadow and nature. Just amazing. He ran off down the beach and he got a stick. And he put some kelp and feathers in the stick. And he said, "Dad, this is a sacred story stick." Now, you can read about in literature about Native American tribes, they had the talking stick, I think they call it. So he said, what we're going to do, we're going to sit inside the sacred story circle and tell each other stories. So the 2 of us, dad and son sat together inside the sacred story circle on the two stones, and we passed the stick back and forth, because this was his rule. You've got to pass the stick back and forth to tell the story. Who's holding the stick tells the story. So we told the stories together, and I can't remember what the stories were. But if you've got a child, you know, like, children's attention spans, man, it's so limited. It's always like they're doing something else. So those moments when you can just get down there and connect was amazing. And this was like maybe the best moment I think that I've ever spent on the beach anyway, just connecting with my son with no extraneous things happening around. It was just me and him, that whole notion of just connecting. It was wonderful, it was magical, it was sacred. So we had this incredible experience, and then we went home. We only live about half a mile away. And we get to the front door. And as we're about to open the door and walk, he digs in his pocket, and that's my boy. He digs in his pocket and he pulls out one of the stones from the circle. And I said, Matthew, what's that? He said, Dada, this is a sacred story stone. He said, you know all the stories we told today? They're all inside that stone. And you put it down outside the front door, and that's where it is today. And I tell you that story because this notion of connecting with others, to me, is what makes life meaningful. That's your outward journey. Your inward journey is obviously, and I'm hoping you liked my perspective, and I'm hoping that there might be something there for you in how you look at business and how you look at life. If there isn't, it was great coming here and talking to all of you, and thank you so much for having me, and good luck to all of you with your journey. Thanks.